Hey guys, Kenna here. Today we're going to be taking a look at the hunger gap. We'll also take a look at food security and start kind of looking at how we grow food and how food is distributed and how that impacts our health and nutrition, and tie that back in hopefully to how we make decisions around what we grow, how we grow it, where we grow it, which all impact the environment and what we've talked about in terms of sustainability. If you look at the UN goals with respect to sustainability for the future, one of the key aspects is eliminating as much of the socioeconomic gap, and one of the key features of that particular goal is making sure that nobody goes hungry. Okay, so eliminating that hunger gap. And so that's what we're going to go ahead and talk about today. So let's jump right in on our essential questions. Okay, for the first essential question, we're looking at what is food security? Okay, so that's a term some of you may or may not have heard of, and we need to make sure you understand what that is. Number two, how are malnutrition and overnutrition similar in terms of their health effects? Number three, what is a food desert and how does it relate to transportation and income? And number four, where does Oregon stand in terms of food security and what programs exist to assist those with food availability problems? All right, so let's jump right in and go over food security. So, what is food security? Well, in less developed countries, people suffer from health problems associated with not getting enough to eat. In more developed countries, others suffer from problems having too much to eat. We also have, you know, food insecurity in the sense that some people are not getting enough food, and we have things like food banks and stuff like that that were providing that. But in poorer countries, they don't have any food pantries. They don't have any homeless kitchens to go ahead and provide meals for those who have food insecurity. So, what are the factors influencing the availability of food supply? Well, poverty, war, bad weather, climate change, and effects of industrialized food production all impact where food goes, who has access to food, etc. Okay? So let's give you a really clear definition of food security. So food security is it's consistent access to enough safe, nutritious food for an active, healthy life without resorting to emergency food programs like the food pantries, scavenging, or stealing. Okay, so that's a key definition. You'll want to make sure that you know that. Now, the root cause of food security, whether you're in an affluent country or in a poorer country, is poverty. Scientists project that by the year 2050, we will need to feed at least 9.8 billion people. We already talked about the growing population, and by the time you're my age, looking at 10 billion people, that's a lot of people to feed. Well, almost half of those will live in poverty and experience some form of food insecurity. Okay? What we're looking at here for that portion of the population is chronic hunger, poor nutrition, health problems due to poverty. And it's estimated that 3 out of 10 people in the world must survive on the equivalent of less than $3.10 a day. So imagine you don't have all of the niceties that you currently have, and in terms of your meals, you have $3.10. How far is that going to go at McDonald's or at Taco Bell? Okay, and that's your entire daily allotment. Well, many people around the planet lack access to or funds for healthy food. And I'm not saying McDonald's and Taco Bell are healthy food because they're really not. So, one of the best things we can start looking at is the old saying, if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. If you teach him how to fish, he can feed himself forever. Well, so we need skills to identify how to go ahead and provide. Now, this gets complicated in areas where they can't get resources, or they don't have the land, or they don't have the environmental conditions to grow a lot of really sustainable food. But these are good things to kind of keep in mind as we move forward, especially here in more affluent countries like the United States. So before we go ahead and talk a little bit more about those types of situations, let's take a look at worldwide hunger and malnutrition. So hunger results when people cannot grow or buy enough food to meet their very basic energy needs. You start looking at these children in some African countries, for example, um, they're just trying to survive at the very, very bare minimum, right? They are lucky in some cases if they have a meal every single day. And so this is really sad, and it's what we call chronic malnutrition. They don't have the protein, they don't have the key ingredients and vitamins to even keep themselves alive. And so that's something that the UN goals hope to eliminate. And this again is focused in areas that have lower income and typically in less developed countries. And when they do have food, it tends to be diets that are high in carbohydrates and low in protein. When we start thinking of aid packages that go to a lot of these countries that have nutrition issues, a lot of it's rice, all right? A lot of it's corn, which is a good staple to start with, but that needs to be supplemented with other foodstuffs if we're looking for a balanced, healthy diet, which is one of the goals of sustainability from the United Nations. Food deserts are developed in more developed countries. This leads to, because of access to healthy food, diets that tend to be higher in fat, higher in sugar, salt, and low in protein, leading to other problems in terms of things like obesity. Turns out that some 2 billion people on our planet suffer from vitamin mineral deficiencies due to some form of food insecurity, whether it's the chronic malnutrition you're seeing in this image here, or whether it's because of food deserts and poor dietary choices, high in fat, sugar, salt, etc. Now this map is going to go ahead and take a look at countries in terms of how much of their population is undernourished. And you can see a big chunk falls in the African subcontinent. Okay. But even with that being said, where do we have the most people that are undernourished? India is the highest at about 221 million people that are undernourished. Now, as a fraction, as a percentage, that's not as high as what you see in some of those African countries, but that's because the population in India is enormous. Same thing when we start looking at China. China is in that yellow category, 5 to 20%, but you have 142 million people that are undernourished. High because the population is so large. The first African country that makes this top 4 is Democratic Republic of the Congo with 35.5 million. But you'll notice that that's a much higher portion of its population. You can see in the green section, the United States, Canada, Russia, Western Europe, Australia. These are not countries that really have to deal with as many percentage-wise undernourished people as in other parts of the world. But that doesn't mean there aren't health issues and there aren't people that are undernourished. But in the United States, at least, one of our big problems is actually on the other side. Instead of being undernourished, we have health problems that are coming from overeating. So what is overnutrition? Food energy intake exceeds energy use and causes excessive body fat. Okay? We eat more than we need, and we don't exercise enough to burn the calories that we do consume. And so this results from one of two forms, either too many calories or too little exercise, or both. We tend to have diets that are much higher in calories and have a far greater amount of processed foods. And the statistics, depending on who you listen to, are somewhere between 65 and 75% of US adults are overweight. For the first time in human history, without a disease or a war, I know we're dealing with a pandemic and that's increased death rates, but human life expectancy is actually on the decline. And this is largely due to poor dietary choices and poor exercise habits. And so what are the dangers of overnutrition? Lower life expectancy, greater risk of disease, illness, in particular cancer definitely is at higher rates in individuals with this problem, lower productivity and lower quality of life. Turns out that obesity plays a role in heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and some cancers. And so when we start looking at the health problems that arise from overeating, in some respects, they're just as bad as those from malnutrition. I'm not talking about chronic malnutrition, but malnutrition. You start looking at issues with heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, obstructive sleep apnea, high blood cholesterol, certain types of cancer. Recent studies revolving around cancer say that obesity and overweight is the second biggest cause of cancer. If you're overweight, you're more likely to get cancer. Keeping a healthy weight reduces the risk of 13 different types of cancer. 13 different types of cancer. So, selecting good food choices has a lot of benefits for your overall health. Eating a balanced diet that's mostly plant based, that really keeps a lot of different nutrients and vitamins in it, is your optimal condition. Okay? So, again, overnutrition is also a problem. You get too many calories, too little exercise, or some combination of the two. It tends to have a similar overall health outlook as being undernourished. It's estimated that about 1.6 billion people eat too much. According to the American Heart Association, 66% of American adults are overweight and 34% are obese, leading to much higher rates of heart disease and strokes, much higher rates of type 2 diabetes, and some cancers. So, keeping in mind the problems that we have in terms of quality of diet, not just quantity, right? Because if we think about food insecurity being related to that definition from the UN that's related to quality of food as well as quantity, what can we do to improve food security? Well, government policies need to be put in place. There need to be subsidies to support health foods, to improve food production and manage food costs to lower the overall cost of healthier feeding options. There need to be more private and public programs to reduce poverty and malnutrition. We need to educate students, okay? Educate future populations, teach healthier eating habits, and teach more sustainable food production processes. The future is going to need farmers. The future is going to need people to produce all of the things that we consume. If they can do that in a more sustainable way that produces a healthier product, that's a win for everyone. But it also means we need to educate the consumer so that we make good decisions about what we're putting into our bodies and we seek out opportunities to go ahead and have a healthier lifestyle. Okay. Consumers, locavores, CSA programs, urban community gardens. I would love to see us as a school have an on-campus garden that helps to produce some of the food we offer at lunches. I would love to see Eugene take some of the gardening space that we have that individuals typically lease out and provide more opportunities in terms of community food. I would love each neighborhood to have its own garden that they can collectively work on that feeds people from the community. And then ultimately, if we have that kind of investment from our people, we tend to waste less. Okay? We grow what we need, what we can eat, and share the rest so that people have the food that they need and we don't throw things out. One of the biggest things that bothers me about our current industrialized food production system is the amount of food waste that we produce. With all the people that have food insecurity and don't have access to good food, why are we throwing out food? Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about this next week when we start looking at sustainable solutions. If a carrot doesn't look right, if it's shaped weird, we tend to throw it out. Honestly, I don't personally care what that carrot looks like as long as it tastes like a carrot and it's healthy for me. So why are supermarkets, why are distributors so focused on the aesthetic of what the food looks like? Members of food insecure households may be forced to skip meals, may be unable to afford balanced meals, or worry their food will run out before they can afford to buy more. They may eat less than they feel they should because they lacked money to buy more. and they may lose weight because there wasn't enough money for food. So some of this has to do with how we prioritize using our funds. What do we pay for, right? Do we pay for food or do we pay for unlimited data on our cell phone, right? Are we in a big house when a smaller house would be just fine and would be easier to put food on the table? But regardless of the reason why, there's no reason that we should not support people getting the food that they need to stay healthy. And if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, okay, you're feeling food insecure, please reach out to me, reach out to your counselor. We have programs through Willamette High School that can help you get food to make sure that you're making those healthy decisions for your body. Okay? Because you're not alone. Almost 1 in 7 US households, which represents over 17 million people, suffer from food insecurity. Okay? So it's not something you should feel ashamed about. It's something that we need to fix. And so food insecurity is a problem even in wealthier nations like the United States. And while it may not be as high percentage-wise as in some other countries, like the sub-African continent, nobody should be hungry. Everybody should have access to healthy food to sustain their bodies. One of the problems that we see in the United States is not just about access to food, but what kind of food. We have what are called food deserts. These are areas with limited access to healthy food and are often defined using these 4 criteria: household income, distance from a supermarket, vehicle ownership, and availability of healthy food in local stores. So what stores are available? What are they selling in those stores? How easily can they get to those stores? And how much money do the people that are living in those areas have? I know that one thing that food deserts look at is the number of quickie marts and fast food restaurants versus grocery stores. So we are fortunate at Willamette that we actually have access to Winco, which is a pretty good grocery store that has a lot of healthy options. I think about everything from the bulk bins to the organic foods. There are a lot of good healthy options that you can choose when you think about Winco, but at the same time, it may not be as fast, may require a little bit more planning. But ultimately, we can start seeing that there are good options there. It's just very tempting to have the fast food right there because it's quick, it's easy, you don't have to work as hard, and it tastes good. It's just not as good for us. Okay, so now let's take a look at maps of food distribution in Baltimore, Maryland, provided by Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future. Okay, we'll use Baltimore as an example of some food distribution visualizations. All right, so here's a community food availability map for Clifton Park, which is a segment of Baltimore. Not average, but median household income is $25,737. We will look at Clifton Park, Southwest Baltimore, and Roland Park. And remember that if you're not familiar with your math terms, median means the middle number in a list of numbers. So if the household incomes were all lined up from greatest to least, this is the income that's in the middle. Okay, so there are people that are well below this. There are people that are above this, but this is the number that's in the middle. It's not an average where you add them all up and divide by however many numbers you have. It's just the middle number. So median household income is $25,737. And percent of households with no vehicles is 44.2%, which is pretty high. Now, if you go back farther east, there are more individuals without vehicles than you have out west, because out west, distances between things tend to be larger, and so more people have vehicles than you see back east. In places like New York City, even with high incomes, a lot of people don't have a car because it's expensive to park it. Trying to drive it is not as fun. There's a lot more mass transit options, so less people go ahead and have vehicles in those places. All right, so let's go ahead and compare that. Remember 25,737 and 44.2%. That's for Clifton Park. Let's take a look at Southwest Baltimore. So in Southwest Baltimore, we're looking at 24,946, so a little bit lower. And percentage of households with no vehicles is higher at 52.8%. Now, if you compare these two maps, you'll notice that the first map doesn't really have a supermarket in the whole boundary. Okay, so I don't see a yellow dot in that entire boundary. You do see, if you take a look at it, some small grocery or corner stores, but they tend to have more limited options. And if you've ever been to one of those little corner stores like a Quickie Mart, they don't always have the best health food options. Okay, maybe a little bit of fried chicken, corn dogs, chips, snacks, cookies. Probably not going to have a whole bunch of produce. And even if they do have produce, probably not that high a quality. Okay? You compare that when you take a look at this area in Southwest Baltimore, you do have a grocery store in there. Still a lot of small grocery stores and corner markets. You can see also some more convenience stores, which are like those things you'd find at like a gas station or a 7-Eleven. Okay. It's interesting also, for me at least, to go ahead and take a look at these parks. How many parks are within the boundary? It's interesting when you start taking a look at that. And then the last area that I want to go ahead and highlight is Roland Park. Now, Roland Park is known as a more affluent area or part of Baltimore. And if you take a look at this, there's one grocery store that's in there, but you have a median household income of $104,481. 104 versus 24 versus 25. So this is about 4 times as much for the average income. And the percent of households with no vehicles is down to 4% versus 52 versus 44. So a very different experience in this particular area. So when we look at this, because they have vehicles, because they have a grocery store in the boundary of their area, this would not be considered a food desert. When you look at this, there's a lot of those little community grocery stores, but depending on what kind of food they offer, what kind of groceries you can buy there, this may or may not in some of those outer reaches be considered a food desert, but they do have a supermarket there, right? The yellow dot versus this one, which if you take a look at it, I don't see a supermarket very close. They're kind of stuck in between two areas that have supermarkets. There aren't as many of your small grocery convenience stores. I can see only one convenience store in the area. Well, there's a couple up there on the northwest corner, but yeah, so definitely more limited access to food. And when you start looking at how many people in these two areas have fewer vehicles or no vehicles, that definitely makes us think about a food desert. Now, I wanted to finish today by getting you to think about what are our options here locally for individuals who do have food security. For you guys, the school is definitely the first option that I would explore. But we have a wonderful program in Food for Lane County. Started in 1984, Food for Lane County incorporated with 1 staff person, 1 volunteer, and 5 board members. That year, the fledgling food bank distributed almost 2 million pounds of food, mostly USDA commodities, out of a small house in Springfield to 43,000 Lane County residents. Today, Food for Lane County is dedicated to alleviating hunger by creating access to food through a network of more than 150 partner agencies and distribution sites, through public awareness, education, and community advocacy, and through programs designed to improve the ability of low-income individuals to maintain an adequate supply of wholesome, nutritious food. And I love that last part of that goal, that wholesome, nutritious food. They're not just giving them bags of junk food. This is giving them produce. This is giving them the means to feed themselves in a quality manner, which ties directly to what we talked about in terms of food security. Okay. Now, this is a little clip from Food for Lane County that kind of goes over their mission. And so I want to go ahead and watch this, if I can get it to load.
We're a very important member of society, helping people who are struggling to just make ends meet. Not people who have decided to just step out of society, but young families. I have been very fortunate in my life, and I know that there's lots of people who are absolutely struggling out there, hungry children, and it's a tough statistic to absorb in this great society we live in this country. And so that's why I feel honored to work here. And you always come away from here feeling good about what you did.
The dinner I made tonight was made out of pantry stuff I got from the pantry. Yeah, I get a food box for me. We get fresh produce every week because we're a rural area, and it makes it nice. I would take people that live off the streets and make them feel like they're humans again, and fill the pantries up so people don't have to worry and not feel like they're the lowest on the ground, that they can knock on a door and say, hey, there's food, welcome. Everybody should be able to feel that way, and not just because we're clients, but we're all humans, and people need to realize that.
Of course, the value is in feeding people, because you can't expect people to affect change in their own lives if they're hungry. That's a real basic point to start. The other side of it is this particular group of people are just astounding in how accountable they are and how transparent they are. If you go to Charity Navigator, the food bank's ranked their highest ranking, which means we spend around, well, slightly under 5% on administration, which is amazing. There's parts of the organization that money can't be replaced by effort or goodwill, and so some stuff just has to be paid for. We need cash money for transportation, for our vehicle maintenance, for some of the admin, the personnel costs at the organization. And so money ends up being a piece of what gets contributed.
It's a karmic thing, you know, you give, you get back. And that's the way we all feel about it. You know. If a person was inclined saying, you know, I need to do something, you know, to kind of help out, you couldn't pick a better place to come here than Food for Lane County. And only one goal, and that's to feed hungry people, the most basic need that a human being has, and I find that very honorable. And we have a good time while we're doing a really good job.
So if you're looking for volunteer opportunities, I know some of you are coming into your senior years, this would be a really great opportunity, is to go ahead and volunteer or help out with Food for Lane County. Now, when we start looking at food security and food insecurity, where does Oregon rank with respect to the rest of the nation? Well, it turns out that Oregon compares pretty poorly in food insecurity and hunger. We are the 14th worst in food insecurity. Remember, there are 50 states. And we are the 12th worst in terms of hunger. So compared to much of our nation, we actually have a lot of Oregonians who are food insecure. Okay. When you take a look at the numbers there for the, big cities, it doesn't do Portland, but Eugene, Salem, Beaverton, Bend, we actually have the highest number of food insecure Oregonians with 166,000. And this is based on a survey taken in 2016. So the numbers are a little old, but I think the trend has continued. So it's something that we in Lane County definitely need to work on. 3 out of every 10 food insecure Oregonians makes too much to qualify for food assistance. So if you're thinking about SNAP and WIC and all of the Oregon Trail cards, these types of things, 3 in 10 of those food insecure people don't actually get assistance because they, quote unquote, make too much. 1 in 7 Oregon households is food insecure. If you figure this class has 41 kids, 42, you start thinking that we would have in just this class, this environmental studies class, we probably on average have about 6 kids who are food insecure. Okay, that we shouldn't have that. We have the resources, we have the food to make sure that people have enough to eat. We just need to make sure that the food gets to those people that need it. Too many people, hunger means not just symptoms that can be diagnosed by a physician. It bespeaks to the existence of a social, not a medical problem. Okay? This ties back to our economics, what we talked about in terms of income inequality. You know, who has access to money to pay for food? It shouldn't come down to paying rent or food. Okay? And so we need to do something to go ahead and try to improve the food insecurity issue that exists in the United States. For as wealthy a country as we are, we shouldn't have as many people as we do that have problems knowing where their next meal is. I usually try and leave you guys when we get to the end of this, because it's kind of a heavy topic, with something that you can do for yourself. The summer plant sale for Food for Lane County begins online April 23rd. So you can go online and order the food that you want, the plants. And they have contact-free pickups from the Food for Lane County Youth Farm, May 7th, 8th, 14th, or 15th. And you can schedule that when you place your order. They have their biggest inventory of plants ever, including many of your garden favorites: tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, sunflowers, sweet corn, zinnias, basil, beans, melons, and so on and so forth. At checkout, you'll be asked to schedule your time and day that works best for you to go ahead, and they'll put it straight into the back of your car. If you want to go ahead and do this, the website is https://plantsale.foodforlanecounty.org. And all the food has been grown on, or the plants have been grown on Food for Lane County Youth Farm. So all the vegetables, flowers, and herbs starts in the sale. We're seeded and tended by staff, interns, and volunteers at Food for Lane County Youth Farm. The farm is not certified organic, but we do use non-GMO seeds, primarily donated by Territorial Seed Company. And they create their soil mix using organically certified amendments and potting soils donated by Aurora Innovations and Down to Earth distributors. So if you want more information about it, you can look them up online. But the Food for Lane County Youth Farm is an educational urban farm located on 6 acres of prime agricultural soil in northern Springfield. They grow about 40 different vegetable crops that they sell to the general public through their community-supported agriculture program and an online produce stand open from June to October. The majority of their produce is distributed by Food for Lane County to their network partner agencies that serve the needs of households who are food insecure. And so they're getting straight from the field produce. I love that. I think that's fantastic. They also offer educational opportunities, including employment, leadership, and work experience for low-income teens, season-long internships for adults, and workshops and volunteer opportunities for all ages. Your purchase of plants from their food network supports their mission and the mission for Food for Lane County to reduce hunger by engaging the community to create access to healthy food. So awesome opportunity. I hope that's something that you guys see as valuable to our community. And if you're looking for those volunteer opportunities, awesome, seek them out. Also, if you want to help in other ways and don't feel like volunteering, remember that summer plant sale starts 23rd. Okay, so that's today. All right, you guys, stay healthy, stay safe, find those foods out there, find a way to give back and help, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care. Bye-bye.